It's 12 minutes past 8 this Monday morning. Good morning to you. This is Breakfast. In a 30-year sailing career, Sir Peter Blake won the America's Cup and every significant blue water race on the planet. A colleague of Sir Peter and one of his closest longtime friends, Alan Sefton, has published a biography of the captain of New Zealand's finest yachting victory, calling it an amazing life. And what a life indeed, from a small boy crazy about the sea to Sir Peter's tragic death on the Amazon River. Alan Sefton joins me now. Morning to you, Alan.
Morning, John.
Paul, yeah. Did he, Sir Peter, was there always a lot of that crazy boy mad about the sea, about Sir Peter?
Apparently so. Obviously I wasn't around in those early days, but having researched his early life, there was nothing else. It was the sea and sailing boats.
Was this a book that you felt you had to write?
Yes, in a way. I obviously wasn't the only one that could have written it, but I had been so close to Peter for so long, I thought it was right and proper that I should do it.
There seemed, particularly at his death, there seemed to be an element of controversy surrounding Peter Blake, the man. Were you surprised by that?
There was some confusion, I think, as to why a person who was as gentle as Peter, it was almost a contradiction, like he was such a fierce competitor, but he was a very gentle man, a very shy man. And there was some conjecture as to why such a gentle, shy man instinctively went for a gun when his boat and his crew were threatened.
Yeah, but to you, did there seem an inconsistency there for you?
I was a little bit surprised that was Peter's automatic reaction, but when I thought about it, Peter was so protective of people around him, particularly of his crews and those that sailed with him, and of his vessels, very protective of his vessels. So as soon as you thought it through, it was almost automatic that Peter would have reacted the way he did.
If Peter were here, what would he describe as his finest hour?
I think you would have to divide that into two different areas. I think his finest sailing triumph, there were two of them, was the Steinlager 2 win in the 89-90 Whitbread, in which he won all 6 legs on line and handicap. That will never be done again. But I think the campaign he got the most personal enjoyment out of was Ends in New Zealand, the catamaran, in the Trophy Jules Verne, because he struck Cape Horn at its absolute worst. They got hammered by massive gales and huge seas, and it took major seamanship to get the boat around and through safely in those circumstances. So he would have got the most personal satisfaction out of Ends in New Zealand.
And of course he set, and we've got shots of that now, he set a phenomenal record, didn't he, at that time?
It was, but ironically, it's a sign of the way the sport goes. It wasn't too long before that record got knocked off.
Yeah, it's just extraordinary. You mentioned already, and I know you've spent a lot of time in the book focusing on the fact that he was very loyal to his people. Would his darkest hour have been the time his people turned on him, when he lost the loyalty of a few key people?
I think very much so, because Peter was an extraordinarily loyal person, and he inspired loyalty in return, and I think that would have completely confused him.
Have you racked your own brain to try and establish what the motivation of those that turned against him would have been?
I have. I don't think they necessarily turned against Peter personally, but their private agendas and their personal ambitions overtook their loyalty to Team New Zealand.
He actually described in one memo, this was around the time that he was trying to resign, trying to relinquish the reins of Team New Zealand. Without him, of course, none of it would have been possible. He was trying to resign. He actually mentioned do I have to kill myself? Which is an extraordinarily strong thing to say, isn't it?
It is, and when you read that in hindsight, of course, it takes on different connotations. It is a very strong thing for Peter Blake to say, but it is indicative of how badly he was feeling about the whole situation.
Saving the world's oceans, which was of course his ultimate challenge, wasn't it, that he had given himself. Had that always been important to him? Did he see himself on a career path that would end with him saving the world's oceans?
I don't think he saw himself on a career path to that ultimate goal, but it was almost always front of mind. He loved the sea. He was very much at home on the ocean. He changed personality within half an hour off the dock. He loved bird life at sea. He loved whales, dolphins, everything about it. So it quietly caught up with him. I think he first noticed that something was going wrong out there when the albatross started to disappear in the Southern Ocean.
There's a famous quote of his, which I think everyone around the world knows, about the lack of albatross. Yes. Yeah.
And that's what started it. And Peter used to do what he called his one-man surveys, and as he did more research, he found out that a lot was going wrong in the environment, and not a lot was being done about it. So quite typically, he put his hand up and said, well, I'll do something about it.
Just finally, Alan, you're one of his closest friends. Are you happy that you've captured the man in the book?
I think so. I hope I have. There's a lot of focus in New Zealand on chapter 16 in the book,
yes,
which is a Team New Zealand chapter, but there are 18 chapters in the book, and most of them deal with Peter Blake the seaman and Peter Blake, An Extraordinary Life, and I hope I've done him justice.
And it certainly was an amazing life. Thank you very much for joining us, Alan.
My pleasure.
Alan Sefton, the book is Peter Blake, An Amazing Life.